Okay, in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to insert and delete rows and columns in Excel. And once again, these are some of the basic fundamental skills that you really need to know how to do completely without using a mouse, because you just do them so frequently that unless you can use the keyboard for all this, it's just going to slow you down way too much when you're actually using Excel and you're actually at a bank and you're under time pressure to get things done. So the first thing I'm going to show you here is how to actually select a whole column or a whole row. And before, the shortcut I showed you, the Shift Control down and then the Shift Control right to select that one area, that showed us how to select this one area within this entire spreadsheet. But what I'm going to do now is show you how to do this, show you how to actually select a whole column like this or a whole row like this. And to select a whole column, you press Control Spacebar, and then to select a whole row, you press Shift Spacebar. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's just building on what we've already been through with the control and the shift shortcuts. And this time by adding a spacebar, we're basically telling Excel that we want to select an entire row or an entire column extending all the way off the edge of the screen rather than just this one boundary area that we can see right now. So just play around and get some practice with that. You can move around with the arrow keys and just press Control Spacebar, Shift Spacebar, and just select individual rows and columns like that just to get a feel for this. You can go over here, press Control Spacebar, Shift Spacebar, jump around to the borders by pressing Control Arrow key, Control Arrow key, Control Right here, Shift Spacebar. And if you press Shift Spacebar and then Control Spacebar, you actually end up selecting the entire sheet in Excel. So it's basically the same as pressing Control A, the shortcut that we went through in the first video. So that's another thing you can do. It's not too useful. Normally you just want to select one individual row or column, but that's basically how you do it. So now that you know how to do that, I'm going to teach you how to insert columns, insert rows, and then delete columns and delete rows. And you might be wondering right now, why are we bothering with rows and columns? I mean, can't we just insert individual cells or individual cells? Can't we just insert individual cells here and there? And the short answer is that it's a really bad idea. You always want to be dealing with entire rows or columns in Excel because when you start inserting individual cells, in the example we have here, for example, if we just tried to insert a few cells between column C and then column D, it would kind of mess up the data that we have because we'd suddenly have a bunch of data up here at the top in this region, but then nothing underneath it when we got here. So we always want to be dealing in terms of entire columns or rows. It's very dangerous when you're building a model to just be inserting or deleting individual cells here and there. And there are shortcuts to do that, but you should really, really stay away from that and focus on inserting entire columns, entire rows, and then deleting entire columns and rows. The command to insert a row is first you press the Shift spacebar key, and then you press Alt IR. That's Alt IR. Alt just tells Excel that you're about to enter a shortcut. I is to insert, and then R is for a row. Finish entering that. So we press Alt IR to insert a row. Now to insert a column, as you might guess, we select the whole column, Control Spacebar, and then it's Alt IC to insert the column. Alt IC to insert the column. So it's pretty intuitive. Just remember that I means insert, and then C means column, and then R means row, and you can figure it out. We're going to undo that quickly because we don't need it right now. So Control Z to undo, Control Z, Control Z, and then Control Z again. So that's how we'd actually insert rows and columns in the spreadsheet. But the more relevant thing, and what I want to focus on for right now, is how you actually delete rows and columns, because that's one of the big problems with this right now. I mean, it doesn't make too much sense to have this data across all these different categories and all these different sections on the sheet. It should really all be listed all together to make it easier to read and easier to go through and analyze. So there are basically two ways that you can actually delete entire columns and entire rows. I'm going to go through both of them. Some people have a preference for one, some people have a preference for the other. The way I like to do it is I like to select the whole column by pressing Control Spacebar, and then I press Alt E D to delete it. And then similarly for the rows, we'll just move down here with Control down arrow key, and then Shift Spacebar to select the row, and then Alt ED to delete it. we can press undo, Control Z to undo both of those. Now another way you could do it is you could press Control Spacebar right here and then press Control minus to delete those cells. We can go down here with Control down arrow key, and then we can press Shift Spacebar and then Control minus to delete that. So it's up to you how you want to do it. Personally, I like Alt-ED more for deleting rows and columns because it's easier to reach those keys because they're all on the left side of the keyboard versus Control minus where you have to use your right hand basically to do it. So I prefer Alt-ED, but try both ways, see what you like better and see what works better for you, whether it's Alt-ED to delete a column or you use Control minus to delete a column. Now, when you're manipulating these rows and columns, you're inserting them and deleting them. Another really useful shortcut key that applies to a lot more than just this in Excel is F4. And what F4 does is it basically repeats the previous action that you performed. So in this case, let's say that we just deleted this column with Alt-ED. Well, then if we move to the left, we press Control Spacebar again, and we press F4, then it repeats the previous action. So we'll undo both of those with Control Z right now. But F4 is really important and a really crucial time-saving shortcut that you'll use very frequently in Excel. We can go down here and practice it with some of the empty rows here. Alt-ED to delete this, and then F4 to delete this one, F4 to delete these. Press Control Z to undo some of that so we go back to our original state. And it's just a real time-saving shortcut. It's not too helpful here when it's only a few keystrokes, but if it's something more complicated, it comes in real handy with formatting or anything that requires 10 or 15 keystrokes. If you can just press F4 and just repeat the previous action, it's going to save you a lot of time in Excel. So we've been through how you insert rows and columns and then how you delete rows and columns and then how you can do it more quickly with the F4 shortcut key. Another shortcut that you can do that's related to those, and let's go to the bottom to demonstrate this one. We'll just press Control down arrow key to get down to the bottom here, is that once you have the rows, we'll press the Shift Spacebar key here and then the down arrow key to select the next row and then the down arrow key to select the next row after that. And we will cut this with Control X. So we have that entire region. And now what you can do is you can move to the top and we can insert these rows now. So that's a very useful shortcut what I just showed you. And the actual shortcut key to do it is you press the Shift Spacebar key to get the row selected, down arrow key, and then the down arrow key to select the next two. Control X, and you have to go all the way to the left up here because it has to look like it's the same area. And then on your keyboard, you press the right mouse button. On my ThinkPad laptop, it is to the right of the Alt key. It's between the Alt and the Control keys on the right side of the keyboard, but it may be different depending on what kind of computer you're using. But try to find it. It should show a cursor, and it basically replicates the right mouse button of your mouse. And of course, you're not using your mouse, so you have to use this instead. So you press that button, the right mouse button, and then you press E to insert the cut cells, and then Enter to activate it. So that is very useful. And the reason why you do that, we could just copy this whole area with Shift Control and then press the down arrow key and the right arrow key, press the right arrow key again, then the right arrow key again. We could just do that and press Control X to copy it and then Control V to paste it. But typically when we're in a model, again, we don't want to be doing this too much. We want to be dealing with entire rows and columns. So it's typically a much safer bet when we're changing around data to actually select entire rows or entire columns and paste them rather than just pasting small areas. So that's our preferred way for copying, cutting, and pasting rows and columns in Excel. So now that you know all that and you know how to insert rows and columns and then delete rows and columns and then also cut, copy, and paste these rows and columns wherever you want, what I want you to do is look at the spreadsheet and fix it. So you see we have a lot of extra spaces around our actual data. We have these columns right over here. We have the row up here. We have this column here. And then in addition to that, we also have these rows in the middle right here that are just taking up space. So I want you to go in and delete all these so that this customer name entry right here is actually in cell A1. So what you should do is pause the video right now and then go in and without the use of your mouse, actually delete all those unnecessary columns and rows until this customer name entry is in cell A1 right here. So pause the video right now and try that. Okay, good. So if you did it successfully, great job. If not, or you got stuck or you want to check your work, here's how you'd actually do it. So the first thing I would do in this case is go all the way to the left of the screen with Control left arrow key, press Control spacebar to select the column, and then you can hold down Shift and press the right arrow key to select the second column, and then press Alt ED to delete them. Now you can press Control right arrow key to move all the way to the boundary, press the right arrow key to move here. Now press Control spacebar to select this, and then hit F4. Remember, F4 repeats your last action to delete this one. Okay, so now our extra columns are gone. So now let's move to the top. We can press Shift spacebar here to select this row. Press Alt ED here. That gets rid of that. And then we can press Control down arrow key to get to the next boundary. Down arrow key, and then Shift spacebar, F4 to delete this. Control down arrow key, Shift spacebar, and then F4 to delete this. Then we can press Control down arrow key, and then down arrow key, Shift spacebar, press the down arrow key again, and then press F4 again. F4 saves us a lot of time over having to press Alt ED or Control minus sign here, and we can delete that. And with that, we're done. And so the most important things to keep in mind, the key takeaways from that are that once again, you select an entire column by pressing Control spacebar, an entire row with Shift spacebar, and then you insert a row with Alt IR, you insert a column with Alt IC, and then you repeat your previous action, whether it's editing something or deleting something or adding something, with F4. And you can also remember that to cut, copy, and paste these individual rows and columns, the preferred method for doing it is to select the whole thing with Shift spacebar, for example, copy it, and then rather than pasting it like normal, we would actually use the right mouse button key on your keyboard and then go to Insert Copied Cells, or just press the E key here to actually do that and activate the command. So I'll just press undo now, Control Z to undo what I just did. Okay, and now that we're done with that, and hopefully you have a good understanding of the basic navigation and editing functionality for rows and columns within Excel, next we're going to move on to how you actually edit individual cells. So we just went through kind of how you move around quickly and how you actually insert and delete whole rows and columns. Now we're going to go into it by cell level and see how you can get in and manipulate the contents of an individual cell.